Could the answer to addressing Ghana's economic challenge have been in plain sight all this while? Former President Rawlings suggests the weak state of the economy is due to the redenomination exercise carried out by the Kufuor administration in 2007.
Ladies and gentlemen, as if by some command, I don't know whether you've ever seen birds whenever they're flying, and on cue they would veer off course and they would all turn in formation. I think we've all noticed that. That's what happened in front of me that morning. I think both soldiers and their wives must have realized, where are they going to? It was an interesting psychological moment, because at that instance, soldiers and their wives just veered into the line of fire towards towards the left-hand side where the armory was. At that moment, I realized that corruption had sparked the rage of this nation.
Now, the former president also accuses his own party, the NDC, of failing to tackle the issue of corruption. My name is Nia Krofi Smartale, and this is today's big story. Welcome to today's big story. Now, 35 years after the June 4, 1979 revolution, former President Jerry Rawlings is questioning why the one thing the revolution sought to change is still rife, particularly in government. The former president is worried his party, the National Democratic Congress, failed to hold his successor, John Kufuor, to account for the heightened level of corruption which he says brought the economy to its knees. Apart from the prevalence of corruption and the redenomination of the city, the former president is also casting doubts over claims that Ghana is one of the few countries to have met the Millennium Development Goal of halving poverty by 2015. But can the redenomination alone be blamed for the crippling of the Ghanaian economy? And is the former president right in raising red flags over the country's attainment of the MDG when other parts of the country are still lagging behind in terms of development? Let's get some analysis on this particular situation. And joining me already on the phone line is the MP for Obuasi West, Kweku Kwarteng. And we're also hoping to be joined by the MP for Teng, that's Akwesi Agyeman Tutu, and also be seeking to speak to an economist. And unfortunately, the line to Kweku Kwarteng has just dropped, but we'll re-establish contact with Kweku Kwarteng and then also with the MP for Teng and then the economist, and get a better understanding of this particular statements that the former president has made concerning the economy coming down on its knees because of the redenomination of the city and the red flags is raising over the country's success or otherwise in terms of attaining the Millennium Development Goals, of the Millennium Development Goal 1 of halving poverty by 2015. As soon as we're able to re-establish that link with Kweku Kwarteng, and we'll be able to speak to him and understand Kweku Kwarteng now joins us. Hello, good evening to you, Honorable, and thanks for your time.
Good evening.
Okay, so let's start off this way. The former president thinks that the redenomination exercise carried out by former President Kufuor, who belongs to your party, actually is part of the reason why the economy is in the state we see it today.
Well, that is obviously ridiculous. I mean, it cannot be said in respectfully any serious discussion of the economy that redenominating your currency would lead to economic difficulties. That is completely incorrect. And I'm assuming that this was a political platform, and the president, who, as we all know, is not necessarily an economist or has not had that much exposure in handling economic matters of this nature, the kind of difficulties we have now, would want to make suggestions like that. All I can say is that that is incorrect. Now, I'd also like to add further that Ghanaians are going through a lot of economic difficulty. We are witnessing the difficulties of the energy sector that is making businesses lay off workers. Cost of living is rising. Liquidity in the system is very tight. People are looking to hear, for those of us who get the opportunity to have what we say presented by the media, to say things that would help us as a nation come together and address the challenges of our economy. And and of governance. This attempt to go back and to lay blames where they should not be laid will not help anybody, and I think we should move on from this.
One argument he makes is that when the currency was redenominated, goods and probably, if you like, services that were under 1,000 old cedis were almost, they virtually became non-existent anymore, because then the redenominated currency became 1 peso for that. Oh, sorry, it looks like the line to Kweku Kwarteng just stripped again. We'll try and re-establish a link with him again and then get his perspective on this particular issue. But already he tells us that he doesn't agree with the former president, who says that the redenomination of the currency of the Ghanaian cedi in 2007 actually contributes to the sorry state of the economy as is being described currently. He thinks that probably it's just he's just saying that for political expediency. But the former president also argues that actually that was the case because of the fact that goods and probably services that were under less than 1,000 old cedis became non-existent. Kweku Kwarteng, you're back on the line. You were saying
items on the market then sold for less than 1,000 old Ghana cedis. Which items? I'm putting this question to all of us. Which items? No item sold for less than 1,000 cedis at a time. So that kind of suggestion cannot be right. And as I indicated, this is not the kind of discussion we need in addressing the challenges our economy is facing.
So for you have an economic background. What, for you, do you think is really accounting for the state in which we find the economy today?
Well, the diagnosis has been made. We are spending far more than we are generating. And that is generating the fiscal deficits we have. And then again, we are importing far more than we are exporting. Okay. So we are having a trade deficit. And
whoops, looks like the line is not being very friendly for us today, but that was the MP for Obuasi West, Kweku Kwarteng, speaking to us about what for him thinks accounts for the state of the economy currently, because he disagrees with former President Rawlings, who says or who suggests that the redenomination of the Ghana cedi in 2000, the redenomination of the cedi, I must say rather, in 2007 contributed to the weakening of the economy right now. But Kweku thinks that we because of the trade deficits and other issues that he was speaking about, that is why the economy currently is in the state that we find it. Hopefully we should also be able to link up with the MP for Tyne, who is Akwesi Ajimanjan Tutu, and then also an economist to also give us a broader perspective of some of the issues being raised by the former president. For instance, whether they do agree that the redenomination accounts for the heightened for the weakened state of the economy, whether corruption that the former president spoke about. He says that is one of the main pillars for which June 4th, 1979 happened, and he's not particularly excited that 35 years down the line, the issue of corruption does not seem to be going away whenever we speak about governance. But let's go back and play back some of the excerpts of the former president's speech today, as he commemorated the 35th anniversary of the June 4 uprising.
Ladies and gentlemen, as if by some command, I don't know whether you've ever seen birds whenever they're flying, and on cue they would veer, of course, and they would all turn in formation. I think we've all noticed that. That's what happened in front of me that morning. I think both soldiers and their wives must have realized, where are they going to? It was an interesting psychological moment, because at that instance, soldiers and their wives just veered into the line of fire towards towards the left-hand side where the armory was. At that moment, I realized that corruption had sparked the rage of this nation.
Well, that was former President Rawlings speaking earlier today at the commemoration of the 35th anniversary of the June 4 uprising, speaking about, of course, one of the reasons that, speaking about corruption, which he says was one of the main reasons why June 4, 1979 had to happen. But of course, he's gone further to also blame the redenomination of the currency on the weak state of the economy as we have today. And then also, we're hoping to be able to get back to the MP for Obuasi West, Kweku Kwarteng, to finish his submissions, and also hoping to get Akwesi Ajumanjantu to the MP for Tyne to join us, also to be able to continue this discussion. I was getting one of them, but unfortunately the line just stripped again. So we'll still try and raise them, and when we do, we will continue with this discussion. But let's take a break at this moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to today's big story. We're looking at the 35th anniversary of the June 4 uprising and some of the issues that are coming up already from the commemoration. Former President Rawlings, who addressed a gathering earlier this morning, raised concerns, for instance, about the fact that corruption, which was one of the main ideas for which brought about June 4, is still rife in the country, particularly in governance. He expressed disappointment at the NDC for not being able to hold his successor, that former President Kufuor, to account as far as corruption is concerned. He also blames the Kufuor administration's redenomination of the Ghana currency, or the cedi, as part of the reason why the economy is in the state we find into the weakened state that we find the economy today. He also has raised red flags over the acclaims that Ghana is receiving for as being one of the few countries to be on the verge of meeting the Millennium Development Goal 1 of halving poverty by 2015. Earlier on, we're speaking to the MP for Obuasi West, Kweku Kwarteng, who does not agree with the former president about the arguments he's raising concerning the redenomination of the cedi. He thinks that that is not and cannot be the main reason why we are going through the current economic crisis. He thinks that there are other factors involved for the state of the economy as we see it now. And unfortunately, the line to him has dropped, but we're still making efforts to raise him, as well as the MP for Tyne and the MP for Tyne to come and also give us his views on the subject. Also, we're hoping to speak to an economist who can also better explain to us whether indeed the economy is in its current state because of the redenomination exercise carried out by the Kufuor administration. And also, don't forget, there's also the issue about whether or not Ghana's claim to be on the verge of halving poverty by 2015 is indeed laudable, because outside Accra, you know that, of course, there are other parts of the country that are still struggling to be able to catch up in terms of development. So we'll try and get these people on the phone lines and then get their views as far as this particular debates are concerned. But joining me in the studio now is my colleague Justice Bedu, who followed the June 4 uprising commemoration today. Justice, thanks for joining me in the studio.
Thanks, Matt.
So let's start off this way. How would you describe or sum up President Rawlings' assessment of how the country's gone so far? 35 years since June 4. He says they were hoping to actually fight corruption. Corruption is still rife in the system. What was his assessment?
I think that for former President Rawlings, we haven't done much to, according to him, change the situation that was confronted us before the uprising.
Okay.
He talked about issues that has to do with widespread corruption, that had to do with a few class of the Ghanaian society, if you like, grabbing a bigger booty of the country's wealth. And for him, it's worrying that 35 years on, we still have to, as a nation, grapple with such issues, and obviously express fears that these these concerns that people still have are dangerous for the stability of the country, and if you like, its development. Yeah.
And how about those who were there? Usually there are the supporters of June 4th, the movement, and there are other cadres who usually come along with the former president for this commemoration. What were their opinions as well?
So, you know, usually we have people who were there, people who are sympathizers of the uprising, who do the usual June 4 commemoration. Today they started from the Kalkudi Park, and it was very early, at about 6 they had started, and marched through the 37 Hospital Junction and came to what is known as the Revolution Square, right opposite the Flagstaff House. And these were ordinary people. I mean, with the interaction I had with most of them, these are ordinary people, and some of them are pretty much very old people. I interacted with someone who was almost 80 years, like an old woman who recounted her memory of the June 4 uprising and why he thought it came about. For some of them, they actually think that June 4 shaped the political trajectory of our country. They think that June 4, Ghana's democracy today is the way it is because of the lesson, according to them, that June 4 set, and so they see June 4 as the foundation on which the democracy of the country is built. And for them, commemorating every day, commemorating it every year, sort of brings to the fore the basic issues that should underpin our quest to develop, that has to do with transparency, probity, accountability, the government being responsible to the people that voted into office. And so, yes, I mean, and you have people who say, yes, there were excesses, yes, people were killed, but we still think that it was a necessary evil that had to happen. Looking at the situation that we had in '79. And
for them, were they equally disappointed, like the former president, that corruption is still rife in the system?
Exactly. Everybody I spoke with was disappointed that even though hopes were high 35 years ago that June 4 was going to be a lesson, that high public office corruption was going to be nipped in the bud, that hasn't been the case since the uprising. One woman I spoke with, she tells me that, for example, she walks into, she gets up and reads the newspaper headlines and reads that a minister has stolen public money, or a minister is alleged to have taken money that is meant for a project, for a community, or has used such amount to renovate his house. A DC has used such an amount, a DC has built. And for people like them, these are worrying stories to hear. They believe that these are the things that will gradually anger people, anger ordinary people on the streets to think that the wealth of the country doesn't belong to everybody, and so they would eventually, if not well contained, take up arms or something against the leadership. And they are hopeful. This particular woman says that he has a lot of trust in the president, and knows that even though corruption or cases of alleged corruption are on widespread nowadays, he was still hopeful that the president would be able to crack the whip and make sure that the right thing is done.
But before you go, though, just veering off a little bit from the issue of corruption and the other issues raised by the former president, I hear he didn't light the perpetual flame as he usually does.
Yes, which is quite interesting because every year he does it himself. This year, what he chose to do was to give it to to someone else to light it. I'm sure it will be one of the.
Did he give a reason why?
Not really, knowing who former President Rawlings is. I mean, he barely talks about the things he does, and he really does things that you wouldn't expect he would do at any point in time. And so we were all the cameras were ready. We just wanted to capture him, light the flame, and then he said, "No, I'm not going to do it today," and rather chose to give us a historical account of what he went through on the fateful day of June 4th. He told the gathering about how junior officers of the rank came to the BNI officers at Burma camp and fired shots at some senior officers, and how they were able to let him out of the place. He tells us that they put him in a van and were moving through the streets, and his according to him, his intuition has saved him a lot of times, and actually he fears he would have been killed just around that time had it not been his intuition that worked a lot for his advantage. Yeah. In fact, he tells a story of how he was able to dodge a gunshot just around that same time because of his fast intuition.
He must have had a lengthy history lesson.
Yes,
those who came around.
Yes. And then everybody who was there was really interested, and so I'm sure if you had gone on for even an hour, everybody, especially the cadres, they call themselves, they would be willing to listen, and they would cheer on every single sentence. It's amazing how much of support President Rawlings still commands amongst the rank and file.
Thank you very much, Justice Beidou. My colleague Justice Beidou was at the commemoration earlier today, and he's been sharing with us some of the issues that came up over there. But also, unfortunately, we've not been able to re-establish links with the MP for Obuasi West, Kweku Kwarteng, and also the MP for Tyne, Akwesi Ajiman Jantutu. Unfortunately, we've been unable to reach them, but that's where we'll draw the curtain on today's big story for now. Mariam Toure will be joining us shortly after the break with the interactive segment.